And we are live. Welcome, mystery and thriller fans, to our pre-Halloween reading extravaganza. And we are kicking off today with the extraordinary Cheryl Head, here to give us the inside scoop on her brand new book based on her own family's history, Time's Undoing. Cheryl, welcome to Mystery and Thriller Mavens. Tell us about this book.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Oh, I'm excited to talk to you about the book. So Time's Undoing is based on an actual incident in my family, a tragedy, actually. It's a story I thought about writing for decades and talked to my mother about writing. In 1929, an African-American man, a black man, Negro they called him then, was killed by Birmingham, Alabama police. That's my grandfather. I have fictionalized this story, set it in two timelines. 1929, his voice, and in 2019, the voice of his great-great-granddaughter, who is a journalist, a newspaper journalist with the Detroit Free Press. She goes back to Birmingham and spends a couple of weeks, and her goal is to find the clues that would help her resolve the mystique that has surrounded her great-grandfather's death in her family. And she meets a bunch of people who help her. She finds a little bit of romance. She finds some danger, obviously. This is crime fiction. And in the 1929 story, we follow the man, his name is Robert Harrington, in his last months in Birmingham, Alabama, with his wife, his pregnant wife, and his 2-year-old daughter, and the community he builds before his demise. It's a story about a man's death, but it is not a sad story. I believe it's poignant in that there's lots about Black community, Black joy, and Black family, and it resolves in a way that I think is very satisfying to the reader and cathartic for me, for sure.
Well, I can't wait to get into every delicious detail, as well as the incredible praise that your book has earned. Starred review from Booklist, review from NPR, Detroit Free Press, Tampa Bay Times, South Florida Sun Sentinel, Criminal Element. We got so much to talk about, as well, of course, as an incredible array of authors. And I can't wait to get into all of it, because there's just is so much to talk about here, Cheryl. But first, I just want to welcome everyone. So we are broadcasting live to 7 different destinations across Facebook and YouTube. So hey, crime fiction loving friends, no matter where you are, you're in the right place. This is the right time. It is Mystery Monday. And on this pre-Halloween extravaganza, we are uncovering all the most delicious things in crime fiction. If you've been here before, you know how it works. Get those questions going in the comments. And if you're new, friends, we're so happy to have you. Get any questions you have for Cheryl just going in the comments. Let's kick right off. Renee joining us from Facebook saying, hi, Sarah and Cheryl from beautiful Southeast Florida.
Yes, love it.
And Cheryl and I are big dog fans as well, Renee. So good to see your pups there in your profile picture.
And I have family in Florida, so wonderful to see a Floridian.
Yeah, we got some wonderful praise from Florida coming in for this book, which we'll get into as well. And oh my goodness, we have Queen Tracy Clark joining us from YouTube. Yay, Tracy.
Hi.
She says, excellent book. I loved Time's Undoing. I loved it as well. Tracy, thank you for joining us today. It's always such a pleasure to have you. And let's take a peek at exactly what the incredible Tracy Clark loved about this book. I'm going to pop it up so we can all read it together. She says, Cheryl Head's Time's Undoing is truly mesmerizing. What a first-rate melding of painful past and hopeful future, told by a master storyteller who gives readers a visceral look at the human cost of hate and fear, and both heart and wings to redemptive peace. You won't be able to put it down. I couldn't. Tracy Clark weighing in. I loved that beautiful review, especially beautiful words, the juxtaposition of the cost of fear and hate, and the heart and wings to redemptive peace. The heart and wings to redemptive peace.
She must be a writer or something.
She must be an award-winning author. I've had the incredible honor of hosting Queen Tracy many times, and I look forward to hosting her for her next one. Tracy, I'm coming for you. I can't wait. Margaret Ponnard joining us from the West Coast saying, hey, Cheryl, nice to see you on here. Renee saying, Cheryl, you're a new author to me. It is nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Renee.
And she's saying, wow, about that praise. Wow, indeed. So, Cheryl, when you set out to, well, let's back up. How long did it take you to write this book?
It took about a year. I was compelled to write it after the murder of George Floyd. My mom was 96 years old, and I talked about writing it for a long time, but I didn't think I had enough detail to write a book of this kind. But after the George Floyd murder, I thought now is the time to tell this story, to maybe make a juxtaposition about what's happening now and what was happening in the 20s and in Jim Crow, Alabama. And I think it was the day after his murder, I started writing this book, and I wrote every single day until it was finished. Writing for 3 or 4 hours in the morning and researching for 3 or 4 hours in the afternoon.
Wow. Oh my goodness. So wow, because I remember how raw I felt in the wake of George Floyd's murder, how raw we all felt, and that you were able to channel that into your writing. 3 to 4 hours a day of research, 3 to 4 hours a day of writing. Wow. Renee saying, God bless your mom, Cheryl. She must have been, she said, that is amazing. That must have been, I mean, tell us about what your mom said or felt when the book came out.
It was, I started writing it before I told her, and I finally called her and said, I'm in DC, she's in Florida. I said, Mom, I'm writing Grandpa's story. And she said, oh, great. And I said, I'll keep you updated on it. By the second week, she was calling me every day asking if I was writing it. And so we got into the habit of me reading what I wrote that day. So she became kind of my co-writer for a while. She would say to me, sometimes she would say, it didn't happen that way. And I said, Mom, it's fiction. And then other times she would say, did you imagine that? That's so wonderful. And I would say, thanks, Mom. So it turned out to be a wonderful collaboration, another way for us to connect around her father. This was her father who was killed. And I didn't really know him, and she didn't either because she was so young, but it helped us to have a different way to think about him. We were thinking about his life rather than his death, and it was just very cathartic for both of us.
Now, Cheryl, tell us about the research. You said you didn't know much about the 1920s. When you started the process, you were researching 3 to 4 hours a day. Where did you start?
Yeah. So the first thing I did was to say to my mom, I'm going to need to call you and ask you some of the questions about Grandpa. I know you've told us about him over the years, but I'm going to have some specific questions as I'm writing. So I would call her often and ask her questions. She started remembering new things in the process of this. So I did some oral histories with her. Then I spent a lot of times on ancestry.com, because when you're writing historical fiction, I really want to do honor to the era and to the times. And so I steeped myself in newspapers about what 1929 was like in America, in the world, in Birmingham, Alabama. So I was going through newspapers.com, and they have a partnership with ancestry.com, and literally looking at dozens of newspapers in any given week. I think I overall looked at 300 newspapers, thousands of pages of newspapers. I would keyword in my grandfather's name, and there were 75,000 Robert Harringtons. Sometimes I'd have a glass of wine. This is daunting. Looked at a lot of maps, read a lot of books about Birmingham's Jim Crow era, spent time on the Southern Poverty Law Center's website, spent time on the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute website. Looked at city directories of the era, trying to find out where my grandfather might live. It was a daunting task. The newspapers in particular, it was tedious. And my protagonist in the contemporary timeline is doing the same thing. So a couple of times I thought, wow, our work is in parallel, So it was worth the effort, though, because I found some documents my family never had. So it was the research was very productive, very meticulous, very mundane a lot of the times, but I found documents we didn't have before.
Like what kind of documents?
Like I had heard about my grandfather through my mom's telling and my grandmother's telling. And because there were Black people in 1929, they were worried about the Klan's involvement in his death. And so they talked about it in whispers always in the family. Nobody really sat down and had a extensive conversation about it, but they would talk about him and his life. And my mother over the years would get more and more information, as I did from her over the years. So when I'm starting to look through the newspapers, I finally come across a Robert Harrington reference in the St. Petersburg, Florida Times, St. Petersburg Times, Renee. And I found a 1 inch by 1 inch article, and its headline said, "Local Negro Killed by Birmingham, Alabama Police." And it turned out to be about my grandfather. So it didn't have a lot of detail, but more detail than I ever had. Gave his address, said he had been killed by a police officer. The story to the Times, the St. Pete Times, had been called in by the St. Petersburg police chief for some reason. It said my grandfather had been resisting arrest. And then it said, the last line I'll always remember, "No other details are known at this time."
Mm.
The good thing about this article, beyond it proving what my grandmother had been saying all these years, is it gave a date for his death, which we never had. And because I had that date, I was able to get his death certificate for the first time in 90 years.
Wow. Cheryl, bring us into the moment when you found that article, when you were staring at that article on the screen and you realized that is your grandfather.
It was mind-boggling. I was, startled. I remember just sitting like this back and just sitting there quietly for a half an hour, then crying, then crying, and then getting up to go tell my partner that I found it, and then sending an email to my brothers and sisters to say I had found the article. And then I waited until the next day to call my mother because I wanted to have the right words to say to her about it, and I didn't want to be overly emotional.
Mm.
And she said, I remember she said, "Thank God." And she said, "You were meant to write this story."
Mm.
Yeah, I feel emotional now thinking about it. Yeah.
And what an incredible moment that 100 years later, the murder of another Black man by police spurs you to uncover the story. I mean, I have goosebumps of your own grandfather's murder.
I was with some writers last week in Nashville, and one of the writers said, some stories just demand to be written. And I think this was one of those stories for me. It had always nudged at me, and Birmingham had always nudged at me. And so writing it really felt like, the culmination of a lifetime yearning.
Oh my goodness. Well, we are all with you in this moment. Leacha Haney, welcome to the conversation, saying, "Wow, what a way to learn something about your grandfather." Renee, I mean, sobbing with you and for him, and yes to all of that, saying, and then learning that through this date of this murder that you had never had before, able to get the death certificate. Renee saying, what an incredible moment.
Yeah, and an incredible resource. I found the exact location of his death. There was some details that were very hard to read about the extent of his gunshot wounds. I found out my grandmother was the actual informant, which means she had to go to the police department. A 19-year-old Negro woman had the guts to go to the police department to say, "You've killed my husband," and to report it to him. Otherwise, it would not be in the record, So, it opened up another part of the world for me to have those documents, and it certainly impacted the writing, and especially the 1929 timeline, which was flowing from my imagination and my research. But I had a different sense of my grandfather through the process because I'd always thought about him only in terms of his death. But the story gave me an opportunity to think about him in terms of the life he lived. Even though he was killed at 28, he was a young man. He lived a rich life.
Wow. Renee saying, do you feel like you managed to get to know him through the
absolutely did. There were times when I thought my granddad was nudging me in the right direction and giving me help on the story, without a doubt. And so I do think I got to know him. I mean, I think I was listening. I'm writing the story and I'm listening to every sign from the universe, every nudge, every idea that would pop in my head. And I think I did get to know him in a way that I never would have if I hadn't written this book.
Cheryl, can you bring us into one of those moments, one of those sacred mystical nudges?
Yeah. Okay. So I write I write the scene of his death in this book. It is one that I did not write in sequence. I wrote the book in sequence, except for that. I knew where that chapter was going to lie. But I wanted to be able to prepare myself for the writing of it. And I really wanted to give myself freely to it. And so I remember asking for Granddad's help. It was a morning. I write better in the morning. It was quiet. I put myself in the right frame of mind to do it, to go back and fill it in. And I just it literally flowed from my fingers. I was just letting my fingers write it, and I was just there to help with the process. And I think it turned out to be a really beautiful chapter that inculcates, how his feelings at the time, but also kind of the spiritual aspect of that moment and of about his spirit going to heaven. It gave me tingles to write it. I don't think I changed a word of that chapter after I wrote it. Maybe a couple of tweaks, but the substance was there.
Oh, that's so beautiful, Cheryl. Thank you for bringing us into that moment. Renee's wondering, but how do you clear your mind to listen to your characters? And that's such a thoughtful question, Renee, because when you are trying to write, you have so many thoughts.
Yeah, I write better in the morning. I'm a really early riser. I often sit, if I can, when I have dogs, that. So if the dogs will let me, I often sit quietly for 15 or 20 minutes and just reflect on what I have to do in the day and be open to what comes to mind. Sometimes I wake up singing. I know that sometimes I have a song in my mind, I'll wake up singing. So those times, because it's happened to me before where characters will speak to me, I'm really open and receptive to what I can hear from my characters. And it almost always happens if I do it that way. Almost always. Sometimes I don't actually hear the voice, but I'll get an idea that moves me to the next step in the writing.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Now, you did choose to fictionalize this story. So Leisha would like to know, who was your hardest character to write about, and why was that? Great question, Leisha.
That is a great question. Actually, the hardest character to write about was the contemporary character, because she is totally a fictional character. I wanted to have this young journalist, African-American journalist, stand in for me, to ask the questions and to do the investigation. But I didn't know who she was. As I wrote her, I learned more about her. She's not me, but I came to really respect her and to like her. She's brave and she's courageous and tenacious. And I thought to myself, who would really follow this story? I wanted that contemporary section to be a way to make the story accessible to younger readers, ones who might look at Black Lives Matter and think, what an interesting contemporary phenomenon, but not to know that this is based on decades and decades of other kinds of cases similar to the ones they're seeing now. And so Megan is her name, Megan McKenzie, grew to be a character I was very fond of, but they were often, I'm not 28, so I was going like, I wonder if 28-year-olds do this. Say that. Fortunately, I have a nice broad range of family and friends who I could call and ask, sensitivity readers and advisors, and I'm going like, what does hookup really mean? But she became a tough character to write, but I really grew to love her, and I think she's symbolic of these young people who are engaged in the world in a way that makes them active in the world. They're not passively watching the world go by. They're engaged, they're activists, they're trying to make a difference in all manner of things, issues that assault us now in the 21st century. So I grew to love her.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for the great question, Lisa. Thank you for the lovely answer, Cheryl. And I want to get into some of this amazing other, some of the additional praise that your book has earned, Cheryl, because it's been such a pleasure to see the wonderful reviews from other writers, including Wanda Morris. Let's take a look at her book. I mean, at her review, because her last book took place in the 1960s.
Historical fiction as well, yes.
Yeah, and so let's take a peek all together so we can read her wonderful words of praise as well. I'm going to pop it up so we can all see it. She said Cheryl's novel Times Undoing is a searing and utterly disturbing look at life for the ancestors and what it meant to be Black and stay alive in the Jim Crow South. But it also a hopeful and endearing story of love, loss, and the protection of our most precious commodity, a family's history. I really love that. She goes on to say, this book will resonate with anyone who's ever looked at an old family photograph or listened to a story passed down through the generations and wondered, what if?
Yeah, so Wanda's brilliant, a brilliant writer. Speaking of photographs,
tell us.
I had one. The only one I have of my grandfather. It's on his wedding day. So it's my grandmother and my grandfather sitting side by side in their finery. And I kept that photograph next to me as I was writing every day to look at his face and to glimpse him. But I also was able to convince the designers at Dutton to kind of infuse his face into the cover. And so when you look at the book cover, there's a face there that is kind of a superimposition of his face from that photograph on the cover of the book. And a lot of people don't notice it until they know that.
I noticed it, but I didn't know it was your grandfather. How special.
It was very kind of them to let me do that.
Did you ask them for that, or they surprised you with it? What was it like?
They gave me this beautiful abstract cover, and I said, well, that's only one part of the story. Can we somehow involve my grandfather in it? And they came up with this way to do it.
Oh my gosh. I mean, that must have meant so much to you and your mom, your 96-year-old mom. God bless her. That's just so wonderful. Renee saying, how lovely. Absolutely. Now, did Wanda know about that when she said that?
She had the advanced reader copy, so she probably saw it in the cover. I don't think but maybe I don't remember if we had that conversation.
Well, I love that she honed in on that, because I think all of us who love family history look at those photos and do wonder. And what an incredible moment. I've had the pleasure of hosting Wanda for both of her books, and to see her wonderful words of praise, for you in this book is just such a full circle moment. And she is not the only one. Let's take a peek of what Yasmin Ango, another of my favorite writers who I've had the pleasure of hosting for all three of her books, also weighing in with some wonderful words of praise. I'm going to pop that up as well.
Nina Knight. I'm a big fan of Nina Knight.
Nina Knight. Yasmin Ango, the creator of Nina Knight, says Cheryl Head's Time Undoing is a poignant tale of one family's generational trauma and the strength and bravery of one woman's quest to uncover her history, her truth, and to finally find healing for her family. This is a story told in the most eloquent and gut-wrenching of ways, leaving me completely undone. I see what you did there, Yasmin, with the Times Undoing. Well, y'all, I have great news. The book is available today, and is available now, and you can order it today from our favorite woman-owned independent bookstore. That is, of course, Murder by the Book. So whether you're watching with us on YouTube or Facebook, here is that link. So click and pre-order so that you can immerse yourself in the wonderful world that Cheryl Head has created for us. 1929, and juxtaposed with 2019, based on her grandfather's true story, and a completely fictional modern day character that is not Cheryl. She wants us all to know. Oh my goodness. Well, there has been so many incredible praise from so many wonderful readers, but there's also been so much praise from the media. So let's take a peek of the Alabama. Oh, thank you for all the hearts on Facebook, you guys. Alabama Public Radio saying this is a novel, smooth, highly readable, and convincing. I feel like I'm listening to smooth jazz as I'm reading that. But I love that. And also the Tampa Bay Times, for our friends in Florida. Let's take a peek at that. They said that you paint a vibrant picture of present day Birmingham, and also bring praising your ability to bring rich detail to the everyday lives of your characters in 1929, deeming this book an absorbing mystery and a moving lesson in Black history. I absolutely love that.
And that was a wonderful, wonderful review.
It's so wonderful to see your work honored and to see it really, really resonate with people. Booklist awarding you the starred review, which you have so earned.
Thank you.
Rating that your gift brought your gift for strong women protagonists and suspense to this tale about a young Black female journalist, vivid and affecting. So, Cheryl, let's talk about that. What do you think is the secret to creating a vivid character?
Well, for this book, in my Charlie Mack books as well, I really want to put myself in the shoes of my characters.
Mm,
I think detail about who they are. We are all, each of us, a unique footprint.
mm,
I think the vividness comes through our quirkiness, our habits, our language, the way
mm.
we see the world. I think crime fiction writers see the world in a different way. We're a little bit weird, but we see the world in a different way. You know this. We're great observers, and so when I write a character, a central character, I really want to give him or her these little idiosyncrasies, these little unique markers that make them stand out from make them stand out in a way that you think the reader will think, oh, I never even thought about that. Oh yeah, I guess people do that, don't they? That kind of thing. For writing Robert, it was really just being kind of open and accessible to the spiritual vibes I got all during the process of writing this book. But I filled the background with all the details that I found in my research about what the city was like in those days.
Mm,
It was a booming economy because of the steel and iron industry, cobblestone streets, lots of brick,
mm,
lots of steam. I set the research aside when I wrote, but I immersed myself in it, and I
mm,
always had a visual picture of it in my head as I wrote about it. Uh, the little segregated communities where Black people lived, because it was Jim Crow era. There was very little mixing of Black and white folks outside of the business they might have to do with each other. Uh,
mm.
and I wanted to paint that as robust and colorful and intricate and complex and endearing and rich. And I think I did that with food, descriptions of food and meals. And my grandfather was a carpenter. And so I have sections where I spend time really describing him working with wood and his relationship with wood. It was there were times when felt very like almost like making music to write part of the book. There were the tough times, and there were these really organic music making times for me.
I love the idea of that feeling like music. Renee saying, thank you for sharing this with us. Yes, it's so beautiful and so heartfelt. Leach saying, thank you for answering her questions. That's what we're here for, y'all. Connect readers and writers. Connect you to your favorite writers and introduce you to your next favorite writers and get down into this. Leach has a question. She wants to know, did you come up with the title of your book?
I did. And it shows up in the copy of the book, and I can't even remember where now when I think about it. I'm like, where was that in the book? But it shows up there. And the publisher asked me, do you really want to keep that title? And I was clear I did. It like some other aspects of the book, that one came from a voice, and I wanted to keep it. I think it says it's an abstract kind of a title, but
Mm,
I think it says a lot about understanding that time is and temporal things are not permanent things, and
ooh.
that things can reach across the generations to touch us. And so I wanted to get rid of this notion that we are in a place that's fixed and static.
Mm,
I don't think it is. You and I, have spoken about how these 20s were so important
mm.
to where we are now. It's almost like a space in time where it's a warning sign to us. I think we're at a time, this is a warning about the things we must do, but to take care of our planet, to stay vigilant about social justice, to stay
Mm.
vigilant about the things that connect us as humans. And so, I don't think time is permanent. I think it's fluid. What does James Taylor say in his book, in his song? He says Einstein says we'll never understand it all. You know, I think of time as fluid.
I love that. And I think also we're also at a very dangerous time where I'm seeing a growing trend of people not wanting to look back at the harder parts of history, or the
Exactly.
dangerous or the painful or the ugly.
And we must.
And we must, because
we
if we don't look back, we'll never do better going forward. And we must.
and understand what the implications of ignoring things are, you know, and that's why we can't ban books. We have to have all our stories available because they add to the rich tapestry of our information about our world and our universe and our human connection to each other, I think.
Oh, Cheryl, that's beautifully, beautifully said. Just beautifully said. Thank you so much. John, welcome to the conversation, joining us from Northeast Ohio. John,
right. I'm an Ohio University alum, John.
Yay! Ohio's in the house. Welcome to the conversation. Renee saying, thank you so much for sharing with us, Cheryl. This is just so beautifully said. And I just want to remind you guys, the book is out now, and you are not going to want to miss Time's Undoing. So no matter where you're watching from, Facebook or YouTube, click and grab your copy of the book, because you're not going to want to miss out on this. Leach is saying, yes, I agree. We must look back and find out what has happened. We must, because we'll never do better going forward otherwise. And we must do better going forward. Right. So here is that link to order, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. You're going to want to get your hands on Time's Undoing, y'all. We are out of time. Time is flying when you're having fun. We are undone time. But I just want to say, Cheryl, thank you so much for coming on and sharing this with us. Your reviews in NPR, Oprah Daily, the South Florida Sun Sentinel. I mean, the list just goes on, and I put them all in the comments so that we can. Oh, we have one more. Teresa joining us from YouTube saying, Robert is such a strong, unforgettable character. Beautifully said. And a tribute to Cheryl's, the depth of your research, Cheryl, and the thoughtfulness of your character creation, making him unforgettable for readers. I love that.
Sarah, I'm so unhappy that I haven't talked to you before. You're a great interviewer, and this was a wonderful opportunity to share my thoughts about the book. Thank you.
Well, it has been my pleasure and my honor. Leisha saying, thank you so much for sharing about your book, Cheryl. This sounds like a very good read. Yes, Leisha, exactly. And Cheryl, what a pleasure and an honor to finally get to host you. I'm so thrilled. You guys, Cheryl is also a television producer, a television writer. And she also has a modern day series that she shares, that she writes as well. So you'll want to check out all of these, as well as the incredible praise from Kristen Harmel, Kate Quinn, Eleanor Shearer, Kelly Garrett, Naomi Hirahara, Alex Segura, Abby Collette. Love her cozy series. I've gotten to host her. Fiona Davis. I mean, the list just goes on, as well as the incredible Sean Cosby. And his wonderful words describing this book as harrowing yet beautiful, into the heart of darkness. I loved that as well. To take a peek at this, that beats in the center of the American experience, a tour de force. What a perfect note to end on. Nice. Cheryl Head, thank you for writing this beautiful, powerful, poignant book. Thank you for coming on to talk with us about this. And
Sarah,
please come back as soon as your next book is out.
I sure will, Sarah. Thank you. So great to meet you at last.
Oh, I'm so happy to host you. Y'all, that is a wrap. Leach is saying, so very nice to meet you, Cheryl. God bless you and your family. Leach, is always a pleasure to have you. Teresa, thank you, saying thank you for this time, for your time and for this interview. Teresa, thank you for joining us from YouTube. So great to have you. Y'all, I'll be back tonight with Lee Child and Tess Gerritsen at 7 and 8 p.m. Eastern. You're not going to want to miss that. Cheryl kicking us off with this incredible pre-Halloween extravaganza. That's a wrap for now.